How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. A little tired, not gonna lie.
Yeah. At least the weather's nice today.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you been able to go out?
Just like a quick walk, but it's nice. My friends calling it like the spring of deception.
Yeah.
Winter and then
I know.
winter weather and
It's
then come
supposed
back.
to snow next week.
Yeah. But it's nice to have just even a glimpse of the spring.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Hello. Hi. I'm gonna drop the agenda into the chat just in case we don't have easy access.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mitchell.
Good evening, Mr. Menjivar.
Violetta, is there, since you have full control of the Zoom account, I'm assuming that you can see people in the waiting room. I just want to make sure that our candidates, if they're in the waiting room, they're being allowed in.
Yeah, I actually changed the settings for this one. I got on like at 6:26. So as soon as I got on, everybody came on, but
Okay.
Yeah, I got it. We use Zoom at our school, so had to get pretty well acquainted with this.
And then you have the ability to mute and unmute people. And then if there's any interruption, or I just want to make sure that we're covered. I've never controlled a Zoom account, so.
Yeah, I got it. Hopefully there's not an interruption. I didn't even think about that. Good point.
All right, so Violetta, 6:30 p.m. So I'm going to call this committee meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. And then I just want to make sure there are no other individuals waiting in the waiting room.
No, I don't see anybody.
Okay. Just bear with me for a minute. I have printed out the agenda. It's easier for me to have things in physical form. All right, perfect. Great. All right, so I will do roll call. So Violetta.
Here.
See, and I am here. Great. So the next item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Violetta, do you make a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes.
Great, I second it. And I think that's all we need to do. So, but just to be on the safe side, I'll take a roll call. So do you approve the agenda?
Yeah.
Yes, and I do too. All right, so then the next point is to nominate and the selection of permanent members. And before we begin, I just want to make a couple announcements, or just to clarify the role of the LSC Equity Committee. So I believe it was in January when the Jones Local School Council unanimously voted on creating 3 committees: the Budget Committee, the Health and Safety Committee, and the Equity Committee, to address some of the issues, to address some of the challenges at Jones, but more importantly, to support the Jones school community and the administration and the work that they're doing to just make this school better than it already is. So as far as the equity committee, I just want to be clear about our role. And our role is really just to be a community engagement committee where we get feedback, suggestions, and recommendation to truly support what Mr. Mitchell, who's one of the assistant principals at Jones, who's been working tirelessly since the listening session, and I would say since I've joined the Jones school community in 2019. So it's really to support the work that he's already doing and to elevate the voices of the students and truly amplify their voices for some of the issues and challenges that they have addressed, that they have raised since I've been a part of the Jones school community in 2019. And historically, there have been some issues there have been ongoing issues. And so we just want to be a resource to Mr. Mitchell, a resource to the administrative leadership team, a resource to the teachers, and equally important, or I would argue more importantly, a resource for the students. And that's really what this is about. Everything that we want to do should be centered around the students and advocating for them and ensuring that they have an equitable opportunity at the school. So that's where we are. That's my vision, and I just want to be clear about that. Violetta, do you want to say anything before we move on for these nomination and selection of the permanent members?
Yeah, I'll just echo that. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm a community rep here at Jones College Prep. So I want to acknowledge that I'm not actually like physically a part of the community. So it's been really important for me to try to, as much as possible, try to get information on the Jones community. So really I am here to listen. I am a product of Chicago Public Schools. I went to a selective enrollment high school, even though it wasn't Jones. My mother graduated from Jones when it used to be Jones Commercial. So although I didn't attend Jones, Jones has been a big part of my family as I was growing up too. And yeah, I mean, I'm also an educator. I'm a department chair lead at my own school. And I want to share that I see how passionate we are about the school community. And I like 110% echo that. I'm just as passionate about every single school community that I've been a part of. And have actually recently gone back to my selective enrollment high school where I graduated from to also help in some equity work. Yeah, and I'll just leave it at that. So I'm really using this equity committee as a moment to step back and like listen even more to administrators, teachers, families, parents, and students for sure. So
Thank you so much, Violetta. So moving on to the nomination and selection. So Violetta and I received about 4 candidate statements, and I just want to make sure that I want to give everyone an opportunity who has submitted a candidate statement and who's not submitted a candidate statement to give them a couple minutes to address both of us and just tell us a little bit about why do you want to be involved and what can you contribute to the Jones School community and the equity work and supporting Mr. Mitchell. So I will, if there's anyone who would like to volunteer to go first, otherwise I will just go down the list of names and then you can say, and then you'll have your 2 minutes.
Roberto, I can volunteer to go first.
Thank you so much, Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, thank you, both of you, for following up about this opportunity. Opening this up as an opportunity to serve, our community and here in the South Loop and the larger Chicago community. So as I mentioned in my candidate statement, equity was the initial motivation for why I wanted to begin my career in education when I started as a teacher here in Chicago. And it was really, the reason I chose to do that was because I saw the issue of educational inequity being both a symptom of and a fundamental driver of racial inequity. And what really appealed to me was the idea of, focusing on educational inequity as a really root cause way to address racial inequity, because of how fundamental that is to, driving all the other opportunities in which we see that inequity manifest itself, in our society. And again, it's also a symptom because of the unequal, educational opportunities that are presented to, different racial groups in our country because of the way we've structured almost every aspect of our society, and that shows up in the area of education in inequitable opportunities and outcomes, and then that drives inequitable outcomes from there. So that was my motivation to begin my career in education. It was my motivation throughout. I remember when I raised my hand to potentially fill the LSC open, community representative position. There were questions around, have I done anti-racism work? Have I done, equity work explicitly? I think I cited one example where I was a participant in sort of an internal, kind of educational groups who educate, Teach for America members on the history and background of racial inequity and how, to frame our understanding of the history and how, we got to this point. Beyond that, I don't want to misrepresent, my experience in doing anti-racism or equity work. I haven't, but I can't think of something that I would be more motivated to volunteer my time and energy to do. As I mentioned in my candidate statement, part of the, this moment that we're in, where we're having this reckoning as a country and as a society around, what's brought us here to this moment and the inequities that still exist. That was really a part of my motivation to get back involved more directly in that thing that had really motivated me out of college, which was education and addressing educational inequity. And that was part of why I wanted to become more locally involved and raise my hand to participate on the LSC. So I really appreciate this opportunity to volunteer my time and energy in this cause, because it really is, it directly speaks to, going back a decade, my original motivation to participate in, to begin a career in education and to be involved in addressing educational inequity. So thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Does anyone else want to volunteer to go next? Laura Bityou.
Hi, everybody. As you may remember me from the last LSC meeting, I spoke to being a South Looper myself. So I live in the South Loop, and I'm really excited to get involved in the community. But my reason for wanting to be part of this equity committee is basically twofold. One, I'm very passionate about education. I've been in education for over 15 years, both inside and outside of the classroom. I was a teacher. I was a department chair, grade level chair, and most recently an administrator as a dean of students. I just had a baby. As you could see, I'm in the nursery right now. She's, I might be in and out, but so I actually decided to take some time off as in the midst of the COVID and coronavirus, but I'm still very passionate about education, the work that I do. Part of a lot of the work I did was around social emotional learning and building and really celebrating diversity, like with International Night and things like that. And we did a lot of work with equity. So I think it's also important when we're having this conversation about equity, understanding the distinctions of equity, so, there's multicultural education, there's social justice education, and there's, culturally responsive education. So I feel like I have a lot of background and passion for education, and I can speak to those things and how how we can be a resource to the school and to the students because of, the tremendous experience that I've had and work that I've done around that. And I also am very passionate about education. I'm a first generation immigrant myself. My parents immigrated from Iraq, and like I shared a story last time, but I'm going to share it with you again today. But basically, my mom taught me a lesson. She told me, no matter what anybody can take away from you, they can never take away your education. And that's what propelled me into the field of education and the field of, making sure that all students have access to education, because I think it's incredibly important that everybody has that education. And I think that's one of the biggest levers for students these days, in not only like their future, but in creating systematic change that is necessary with this work with equity. So I'm, here I'm available because, so I would be very much interested in continuing the work in education.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bityu. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Oh yeah, it's like I bit you, but
Thank you.
but I go by Barrio now. I finally took my husband's last name, so Laura Barrio.
Okay, thank you so much, Barrio. And then Ms. Land, I saw that you said something in the chat that you would like to express your interest. Would you like to go next?
I can go next.
Okay.
I'm the parent of a freshman at Jones, but before we joined Jones, we were at Ogden, and at Ogden, we were doing equity work for many years. I have participated in an 8-month parent training that we did in the area of equity in education, where once a month for half a day on a Saturday, parents would come in with trainers to talk about equity and to really help us understand the whole concept of implicit bias and how to be more open and supportive and accepting of people in the community whose experiences are different from ours. The other thing that it comes along with me is the concept of being a moral rebel. When I see things that aren't right, I want to say something about it. When I see something that doesn't sit with me, I want to say something about it. And there's a lot of psychological research now about being moral rebels. And I think teaching our students to be more aware of what's going on around them and to stand for the people next to them who may have different backgrounds is a real important piece of the equity work that we need to do at Jones, and quite frankly, at any school. Teaching my child that when she sees things that she doesn't feel right about, she needs to not just watch it, but she needs to say something. And so I think there's a real opportunity for parents as well as community members and educators to work together. We have a lot of different experience and a lot of different history that we can put together and say, hey, I've seen this, or I did this, or have you read this, and have we tried this? And let's then work together with Mr. Mitchell and the rest of the administrative and staff team to really pull together what's going to make the students at Jones feel like they belong. I mean, that's the message that I've heard over and over as I've been listening to the kids who've had something to say about how they feel about their experience at Jones. Either you love it or you have had issues where you don't feel like you belong. And I think that there's an opportunity for us as community members and parents and people who are in the school on a daily basis to say, okay, what can we do that everybody should feel like they belong and that we all stick together? And I think that's really the foundation of any equity work that we might pursue.
Thank you so much, Ms. Land. JY, would you like to take advantage of the 2-minute opportunity, of this opportunity?
Yes, certainly. Good evening, everybody. And so I'll start with my personal why for, why I'm invested in terms of anti-racism, equity, and education. And I think when I think back on my own experience going through the public education system in the United States, I never had a teacher that even looked like me until I was 22 years old, a senior in college. I never encountered curriculum that reflected my identity as an Asian American or a queer person. period, until I did that work myself and that research myself as an educator after undergrad, right? And so in becoming a public school educator, I made it my philosophy that every single student would see themselves in the content that I delivered in the classroom, and that they would feel valued and that they would feel affirmed. But I've also learned in my 7 odd years working in education that it's super important to include a variety of voices in equity work. And that includes students, that includes teachers, that includes parents, that includes school leaders, that includes the community and community leaders. And so what I would bring to this community is experience in designing anti-racist curriculum in a public school setting. I would also bring experience initiating anti-racist work with adults in the education nonprofit sector. And I would also bring experience in utilizing data to drive anti-racist practice in the education sphere, and that's the work that I'm currently doing. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, JY. Ms. Carol Deely, I know you had expressed an interest. Would you like to take advantage of this opportunity to express your interest in being involved in the Jones LSE Equity Committee? Ms. Deely, you're on mute.
Thank you, but I'm not really interested in joining the committee. I just wanted to attend the meetings.
Okay, my apologies, Ms. Deely, and thank you for attending. And then I just want to open it up to the floor to make sure I haven't missed anyone who has expressed an interest. And we do have a student representative, Dania Boyd. I see that you're in attendance. I just want to make sure that give you this opportunity to either speak or make any sort of comments that you would like. Okay, I just saw your chat. Thank you for attending and supporting. Is there anyone else? Okay. So the next step for us is just for Violetta and I to go into, oh, that's right, now Dora Bussey. I'm sorry, before I just saw her square pop up. Miss Dora Bussey?
Yes.
Hi.
Yep. Oh, hold on, let me do my camera too. Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
So would you like to take advantage of the 2-minute opportunity to express your interests and why you want to be involved?
I won't have 2 minutes, but I'll just say that I am a parent of a junior and have had almost 3 years of experience with being at Jones and another 4 years of another selective enrollment school. So I've had about 7 years of experience with CPS, being involved in CPS. And I just probably what everyone has said, you know, we just want to make sure that things are in place for students to be successful, whatever resources that may be.
Thank you, Ms. Bussey.
Sure.
Hopefully I'm pronouncing your
Yes, you are. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So then the next step for us is to go into a closed session for Violetta and I to discuss and then make our selection. Then we'll come back and make our selection. But before we go there, I just want to make sure, I want to give Violetta an opportunity if she has any questions or comments. I do have one comment to make, and it may be a question for all of the candidates, but that's where I'm at.
You can go ahead, Roberto.
Okay. So this is really important work. This is very difficult and important work. And so commitment is key. Partnership is key. Collaboration is key. And the other component is being in situations that are uncomfortable, but productive. We have to, the students in the 18 months that I've been here have been continuously expressing and specifically our BIPOC students, in particular our Jones Black students, have been expressing this sense of not necessarily belonging in the school. And their narrative is important. Our student representative on the LSC has taken this leadership role and has amplified their voices, her voice. And so it's up to us. It's up to the adults to take action. So I just want to make sure that everyone here feels comfortable being uncomfortable and dedicated to this work, this difficult work. Yes. Okay. So Violetta, you know how to control the Zoom and take
Yeah.
us to a breakout room.
Yeah, I'll put you in a breakout room and then I'll join you. So-
Okay. So before we do that, we have to make a motion to move to a closed session. So as the chair, I don't think I can make that motion.
Can we move to a closed session?
Okay, I second it. And so we will move to a closed session.
Should we give everybody like a time, like when we'll be back so that they know to come back too? Like, should we do like 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah, 5, I think 5,
Okay,
about
so
5 minutes.
we'll be
Okay,
back-
great.
We'll be back at 6:58,
Okay.
just to give us some transition.
Oh, wait, Violetta, before let me, okay, yeah, okay. So 5 minutes and then I'll meet you in the breakout room. All right. Hello, everyone. Just want to make sure everyone is present. I see Ms. Lan, JY, Mr. Perkins. Let's see. Brett, you? Oh my gosh, I probably butchered that. I'm sorry. And Miss Bussey. And I think that's everyone. Right, Violetta? Did I miss anything? Did I miss anyone?
I don't, oh, there's the Y. Yeah, no, I think we're good.
Okay.
Cool. So I'll start. So we, or at least I can speak for myself. I felt really inspired and like excited to start working on this, specifically with like parents and other community members that are very involved outside of the school. I will acknowledge that an area of growth for me is building more relationships, not like with administration at Jones, also with teachers at Jones, and students at Jones. I mean, it's like hard because I don't teach there, but yeah, so because of that, we are going to open the committee to all 7 people, but we know that an area of growth is getting more students onto the committee. So the committee, from my understanding, either has to be 7 or 9. So we're going to look to try to like build relationship or do whatever we can to bring 2 students onto the committee, either by the end of this year or by next year. Roberto, do you want to add anything to that? So I don't know how to like, we accept everybody.
Yeah, so I just want to make a quick comment here. JY, one of the things that you said was bringing various voices and individuals into this group. And just to follow up on what Violetta said, I think that is important, right? We have 3 parents on here. We have community members that live in or around the vicinity, and people who are in this education field. I'm not an educator by trade. So I think it is incredibly important to have parents, community members, and like Violetta said, we do need an area of growth here is the student voice. Because as I mentioned earlier, they are the center of this. and we need to support them and to ensure that they have equitable resources and opportunities to thrive and live. So I'm going to ask, so I see some of my council members here, Council Member Rachel Zen and Cassie Creswell. And I just want, I don't know if Ms. Creswell can help us with whether we have to nominate everyone individually, or if we can just make a blanket, say we're accepting all 7 candidates that spoke today and that have expressed an interest to being part of the committee.
Yeah, I think you can do a blanket thing.
Okay, thank you.
There's only 2 of you to vote, so it's pretty.
Great. So do I hear a motion?
I motion to allow all 7 candidates.
I second. We're gonna do a roll call vote. Violetta,
Yes.
and my vote is yay. So welcome. I really do appreciate your interest, your passion, and your advocacy. So the work really begins now. And before we move forward, we do have a couple of our administrative leadership team, and I want to give them an opportunity, if they would like, to express any comments to this Jones LSE Equity Committee. And I just want to reemphasize that we are my vision is to make sure that this is a community engagement committee that uses all our available resources and knowledge to support the work that's happening in the school and to support our students. So I open it up to the floor to both of our assistant principals, if they would like, Assistant Principal Eric Mitchell and Assistant Principal Plunkett.
I have nothing to say at this time. Congratulations to the development of the committee. I do look forward to working in partnership with you all, moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Assistant Principal Plunkett. Not hearing from Assistant Principal Plunkett, we'll move on to our agenda. So I hope everyone, so the next item here is nomination and selection of a secretary. So I am the chair, and Violetta, the LSE, has agreed that I would be the chair of the Equity Committee and Violetta is the vice chair. So we would like to entertain anyone, a volunteer who would like to be a secretary, the secretary officer.
Can we go over what the roles would be for secretary?
Yes. So in general, the secretary is responsible for taking the minutes, responsible for ensuring that our agenda, working with the administrative leadership team and with the to post our agenda 48 hours in advance. So the secretary would work with the chair and the vice chair to ensure that we have the minutes and that we are posting the agenda 48 hours in advance. That's pretty much a high overview. And then just helping us collect documents that would support any sort of information, any that would support the equity work that we're trying to do here. And the minutes don't have to be, they do have to be thorough so that when somebody's reading the minutes, they can understand what happened during the meetings. But they do not have to be verbatim.
Can I ask how long the meetings typically are?
So this is, I can imagine like at least an hour. but this is our first annual organizational meeting. And so if there are items that we need to discuss, I can imagine that this would take about an hour. And it just depends on, like, one of the things that we do want to do is making sure that we have information ahead of time before our meeting. So that way we're not just reading the information to each other, and then we can come in to the committee to engage and have questions and follow up.
I could be the secretary. if you'd Like,
Thank you. So I make a motion to nominate Laura to be the secretary of the Equity Committee. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and then I'm going to do a roll call vote. This is just procedural. So I'm going to go down the line. It's yay or nay, or you can abstain. All right, Violetta,
Yay.
Miss Deborah Land,
Yay.
JY,
Yay.
Laura,
yay, sorry.
Michael, Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, Michael's fine. Yay.
Okay, Michael, Miss Dora Bussey,
Yay.
and I think and then me, that's yay. So that's unanimous. So congratulations, Laura, you are our secretary. And I look forward to working with you on this. So the next role is the FOIA OMA officer. So I am the FOIA OMA officer for the Jones Local School Council. So I think, unless somebody else wants to be the OMA FOIA officer. Oh, Ms. Land?
I'd be happy to do it. I was the FOIA OMA officer for the Ogden LSC before.
Okay. Anybody else would like to volunteer? I'm more than willing to share, to defer to you.
I assume you have plenty to do.
I do. Thank you so much. And I'm willing to help. So I'm willing to help in any way. All right. Do I hear a motion for Ms. Land to be the FOIA OMA officer for the LSC Equity Committee?
I nominate Ms. Land to be the FOIA OMA officer.
Do I hear a second?
I
I'll
second.
second that.
Was that JY? JY seconds it. Okay, roll call vote here. Violetta.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Land.
Yes.
JY.
Yay.
Laura.
Yay.
Michael.
Yay.
Dora Bussey. Dora, do
Yay.
you prefer Dora or Ms. Bussey? I just want to make sure that I'm being
Dora is
respectful.
fine. Dora is fine.
Great. And then Roberto is a yay. So that is a unanimous vote. So Deborah, congratulations.
Thank you.
You are the OMA FOIA officer. So the other thing I do need to mention about the OMA policy. So that's the Open Meetings Act, the Illinois Open Meetings Act.
Do I need to do the
Everyone.
classes?
So the rule is, if you've already completed the OMA and the FOIA training and you have the certificate, then you don't need to take it again. You just need to provide the certificate. For everybody else, for all of the members on the Equity Committee, you are required to complete the Illinois Opens Meeting Act training through the Illinois Attorney General's office. You have 90 days to complete that. I will email everyone the link, and then you just have to complete the OMA. You'll get a certificate, and then you have to provide that certificate to our newly elected OMA officer or to our secretary of the chair, and then we will retain that. If you've already completed the OMA and you have a copy of your certificate, then that's all you need to do is produce the certificate to us, and that's it. Okay, everybody understand?
So there's no particular time frame it has to be completed in, as long as we have done it.
There's actually a particular time frame. There's 90 days.
No, I mean, for, like, I did the classes for a year ago.
Nope. If you've
So
done
that's
it, one,
acceptable. Okay, good. I'll see if I can dig out the certificates.
perfect, great. All right, so then moving on to the next item on the agenda. This is the committee member introduction, and I think Violetta wanted to take the lead on this. This
was just to introduce like everybody in the meeting. But I feel like we got a good introduction with everybody's candidate statements. So unless anybody else has something else to say, or anybody that's not a candidate, just to know who else is in the Zoom room would be a little bit helpful, at least for me, to get to know everybody.
we will, if you want to, Violetta, on the agenda, there's the item number 11, the public participation. So for everybody else in the room who would like to participate, we can then allow the public to participate on item 11. So
Sounds good.
for the newly elected members, are there questions for us?
Are we meeting on a monthly basis?
That is an excellent question, JY. So that is going to be dependent on us. Since we are a committee, we have some flexibility. We do not have to set a regular schedule, unlike the Jones LSC, the school body. During their annual organization, they have to create this monthly schedule. We do not, we have some flexibility on this. I think that it's going to be important for us to meet on a regular basis, somewhat on a regular basis, and that's just going to depend on how much we can get done. How much we can get done during our meetings.
Will our meetings be recorded? I know the LSC meetings are, but is that what we're planning on doing or no?
Dora, so the governor has signed a law that all virtual meetings must be recorded. And this goes to our Laura. This is so as the secretary, you know, that is an official position. We cannot just rely on the recording. There's actually has to be written minutes, and then this body then has to approve those minutes the next time we meet, and then make them public 10 days after we've approved those minutes.
Okay, so should I start taking notes now, or is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and am I putting it directly into the agenda that is shared?
Yeah, you can draft it the way you want. There's some flexibility. So if you want to start a new Word document, or if you want to use the agenda, that's perfectly fine too. It's up to you. And then this video recording will be made available. And then if there's something we missed, we can review it. Otherwise, once you've written the minutes, we'll share that with the committee, and then the committee will have an opportunity to review it. And if there is something that was missed or mischaracterized, we'll have an opportunity to correct it. And then when we meet again, we'll approve those minutes.
Okay, just to sum up, to recap, just to make sure I got it clear. So as for this meeting and all meetings going forward, I'm taking the minutes, and at the end of the meeting, we all have to approve the minutes that I've taken. And the minutes are not scripted, but basically give like a synopsis of each of those items, in addition to the recorded video. Is that correct?
So that is correct, with one correction. So we
Okay.
will not approve the minutes at the end of this meeting.
Okay, got it. So I have time to like go back and add things if I needed to. Okay, got it. Okay,
That's correct.
sounds good. On it.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions from the equity committee members?
Miss Linda just asked if we could get everybody's email address, which I think is a smart idea, so that we could keep track, at least for the people that are on the committee now. So if you can drop your email, I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. Drop your email in the chat.
They can do that, or you can email me and I'll put the email together, and then I'll have a spreadsheet and put everyone's email information in there, and then you'll have access to that. So we are a 7-member body. So that means quorum is 4. So if we do meet and we have 4 members, then we can vote on resolutions. We can vote on certain things, recommendations that we want to make to the Jones LSC, which ultimately will make a recommendation to the school administration. Okay, so quorum is 4. That means as elected officials, this is kind of or appointed officials, I should say, no more than 2 people can meet to discuss committee related items. Okay, so I have council member Rachel said no more than 3.
Yeah, I think Rachel's right.
Yeah, so no more than 3
Right.
people can.
If 3 people want to meet,
Mhm.
totally okay. It's more than 3. If it's 4 people, absolutely not.
Oh,
Okay,
wait.
I'm not quite sure about that.
I'm
Yeah.
so ready to be 100% wrong on that.
I believe because we are a 7-member body, 4 is quorum, subtract 1, no more than 2 people can meet to discuss LSC committee items. That doesn't prevent you from socializing. We just can't discuss certain things. Business, LSC business or committee business. Everybody understand that? Excellent. And when you go through the OMA training, it'll be clear. Okay, so the next item is the Black Coalition Statement, the Jones Black Coalition Statement. In February, the Jones Black students issued a statement regarding their experience and demands for the Jones local school, for the Jones school community. And so I hope everyone's had an opportunity to read the Jones Black Student Coalition Statement. In their email to the school community, they had asked every member of the school community to share it through their platforms. So this is one thing I think that I just want to gauge. I just want to make sure everyone's reviewed the statement. And what I would like us to do, or a couple folks to do, is try to respond to that if we can. So something like recommending a resolution or response to the Jones Black Coalition Statement.
I actually have a question really fast for Mr. Mitchell or anybody in the school. Has there already been basically what we're looking to do, but from admin/staff?
So prior to the letter going out, I met with the Black Coalition. We talked about the letter. We talked about some of their actionable items. We even discussed what was already being addressed. So an additional resolution or statement, that was my question. Who are you making the resolution to? Because if the resolution is to administration to act upon these various things, there are things that are already being acted upon. I don't have the letter in front of me to bullet point each and every item that they mentioned, but there's been more than just discussion. We've been looking at what are some of the actionable things that can be done. So for example, one of the items I recall has something to do with, so I can tell you, I met with the social studies department and they're looking at the ways that they can improve their curriculum, which was something that was addressed in their letter. They asked for, everyone to access the Harvard anti-bias or the implicit bias test. And we discussed that, but we did not fully implement that. I think it was put out there, but like those are some of the things that were on their actionable item list. And so like we've been making progress on that. So I don't know what else you would like to see being done in that regard.
So thank you so much, Mr. Mitchell. I guess I want to acknowledge this. I would like the LSC to acknowledge in a statement their letter, and that the local school council is going to use every resource available to support their actionable steps. So one thing is just to acknowledge that they have written the statement, that we see them and we hear them, and that we want to move, we stand with them. That these are steps that we can take, some of these items that we can take immediately. And there are some things that, might take, that are already in the works. So an acknowledgement that we hear them, we see them, and we are here to support them, and to acknowledge the work that you're already doing, Mr. Mitchell, and the school's already doing in addressing of these some of the actionable items. So I think it's important to acknowledge that and draft up a statement that we stand with them. We understand the challenges that they have faced, and that historically that their fellow peers have faced.
Denai raised her hand.
Yes, hi. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Danaya Boyd. I'm the local school council student rep, and I'm also the president of the Black Student Union at Jones, which is one of the 3 clubs that's a part of the Black Coalition. And I wanted to say in response to both Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Menjivar's comments, I think that it never hurts to have another body assisting. And I think there are some of the demands, like say, for instance, the reporting system, like to report incidents that happen in the student body, that can definitely have another body working on them. Like if that's something that the equity committee would like to work on, and it seems like, you have the manpower to do like something like that. I think that like smaller things like that obviously don't need, like too much funding, right? Like that can be like a Google form, things like that are things that the LSC can do. So I don't think that like it has to be just like a symbolic like resolution. I think there are definitely things that this body can do, even if it's not like called for in the letter. But yeah, I guess I'm just trying to say that like, even though the administration is doing work, more work can always be done. So I don't want this committee to be afraid to like, with the administration's like knowledge, of course, take on other things to help assist not only like Black clubs, but like all other identity clubs at Jones.
Thank you, Denaya. So right now, the motion on the table basically is, because we are a subcommittee and we are the equity committee, is to talk about or discuss our action step, or how we can help support students and families within the school. But we need to decide that and then take it to the full LSC, so that we can then take it to the full LSC.
Right, and thank you so much, Denaya, for that. And you're right. So I think, so you just mentioned the incident reporting, which is action item number 3 in the statement. And I think at the LSC meeting, and Mr. Mitchell, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you had expressed that, or maybe it was Dr. Powers, that you are working on that you are working on creating that form for Jones. And I think the next step would be to get legal to approve that form.
So to be clear, the students were working on it with our support. The Student Voice Committee specifically took the lead on that. And we have met with them a couple different times to kind of tweak out the form and have some conversation about what would work, and some suggestions. And to my understanding, they've also met with members of the Black Coalition and got input from them. I just got an email, like I said the other day, and I said this at the LSC meeting, in which we are going to touch base one more time about the document. And my hopes is to be able to send it to legal to get, it vetted in that regard. And then the next steps would be to have a conversation about how do we promote this? How do we let students know that this form will be accessible, and who will be reading that form? Like, I want to say there was discussion about if there are issues with administration, who they can send their incident to, as opposed to us. So we've talked about a lot of different things. So we're hopefully nearing the end of the development of it and looking more so towards the implementation of that form.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Are there any members on the committee that have any questions for Danaya about the incident report, or is there anything that we can do to support Danaya and Mr. Mitchell on the incident report?
I have a broader question. So right now we are trying to determine what we are going to recommend to the LSC to recommend to the school. Is that correct? In terms of what we're going to do next as it pertains to responding to this letter. Do I have that correct?
So that is yes and no. So it sounds like from what Danaya is saying, that if we could take one of these items that are on the action on the Black Coalition's actionable step and try to support something like that. Danaya brought up the incident report. There's already the student voice is already working on that. Is that something that we can do? And I'm not sure if Danaya would like this body to review that form and make any suggestions, or do you feel like that form is already in a good position? It sounds like from Mr. Mitchell that it's pretty close to being sent out to legal. So if there are things that we can do to move that, that would be great. Mr. Mitchell.
Two things. One, Danaya, and please correct me if I'm wrong. The way I heard what you were saying is, just generally speaking, this equity committee can assist in smaller things. It doesn't necessarily have to be, there's other ways that you could help. You use that form as an example where they could perhaps get some more input. So that was my understanding of what she was saying, not just specifically this form, but the committee as a whole and how they interact with. You talked about the committee, supporting students and how you all can do that. It sounds like to me what she was saying is it doesn't have to be in necessarily a resolution form or those kinds of things, but some of the littler things that that could use some assistance where there's additional manpower being needed for So she gave that example. There could be another example of just reaching out to various committees and hearing what needs to be said. So, for example, one of our school priorities is amplifying student voice. And one of the ways it was mentioned in that document is reaching out to various clubs. I can tell you that has not happened in full earnest. There have been some clubs that we've reached out to, but not all clubs. And part of that's due to manpower. So, that could be something, a way in which, the team could support. So I'm just hopefully clarifying what I thought I heard Danaya say. And while I have the floor, I do want to ask one more quick question to you, Mr. Menjivar. You mentioned that the procedure is that the committee is going to come up with these recommendations to then bring to the LSC, to then bring back to administration. And I just think that that's a lot of bureaucracy. If we're truly collaborating, there can be conversations and recommendations made at that level. And if there are to be any actions to be made, then that conversation can then, go to the LSC. So therefore it can be communicated out to the community. But it just seems like a lot of extra steps if we're really serious about doing this work and doing it in a timely manner.
Thank you. I think that is, I may not have articulated myself very well, but I think that is absolutely a great strategy, is working with you and your team and trying to figure out, like, where do you need the additional resources that this body can take? At least that's what I want. I think that supporting that and then bringing it back to the LSC and then saying, here are some things that we think the school should really lead and take these items forward. And I started this conversation with trying to engage this committee to release a statement, because one of the items was item number 4 in their action steps, which asked the Jones administration to release a statement that demonstrates active concern for engaging and developing improved quality of experience for the Black students. So that's where I was coming from. Initially, it's like, can we develop a statement so the LSC can just acknowledge that and bring it forward? At least as you mentioned, Mr. Mitchell, like, is there a small step that we can take now and then meet with you to address where do you need the resources?
Were you making a statement or were you asking me an actual question?
I'm sorry, I was just making a statement, like
Okay,
where
I just want to be clear. I just want to be clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
I do have a question really fast. So how can we support you, Mr. Mitchell, since we are all here to support you in equity work? You mentioned like reaching out to some of the committees that y'all haven't been able to reach out to. Is there anything else that you have that we could support you with?
I think that that's a conversation we need to have at a later point in time where I can process a little bit more and be able to reach out to you and we can speak a little more specifically rather than taking airtime right now to try to figure that out. I appreciate the question, but I'm not prepared to answer that in totality at this very moment.
So I think let me ask any other members if they have any questions or comments or a reflection on the statement from the Jones Black Coalition.
I guess I would add, I mean, I agree with you, Roberto, that there should be a response of some sort at a minimum to acknowledge that this statement was put out there by the Black Coalition. I do wonder, and I guess this is also then I'm going to pivot to a question for you, Denaya. Would it be useful for the students to get a response on each of these 4 action items that have been listed, just to say like, this is the current status, like, hey, we hear you, and we've read what you wrote, and this is where we currently are in terms of each of these things that you've asked for. Because right now I don't really know how much, I guess, updating there has been. So I guess as a first step, that would be something that I would wonder about.
Yeah, so I think that coming from the equity committee, just because this is like a new committee, and I think one that was definitely sparked by conversations about like what it meant to be Black, like even before this letter came out, what it meant to be Black at Jones. I think that would be great. And I think that if the committee acted as maybe, you know, obviously the administration is also committed to it, but, you know, made it a priority, again, not only for Black clubs, but for all clubs to say like, this is where we are with helping you. I think that'd be cool. Yeah, I don't have anything against that.
Is it possible for us to meet directly with all of the whole club, or once we've had a discussion like within our LSC equity committee to just like collaborate and have that conversation? Because I feel like that might be good too, just to hear directly instead of, you know, having conversation without the student voice. I know that was like highlighted at the beginning. So I feel like the best route here could be just to meet directly with the students, just hear their voice and then sort of collaborate on the next steps together.
So the student body in general, but especially students I've talked to, students of color, have expressed that like maybe it's not the best to include us on decisions like that, because like at the end of the day we are students. So not only do we not have like the expertise, like we can give you our ideas, we can tell you like what we think will change it, but I don't think that, like, I'm a senior, I'm graduating, but I don't think that like the other people in the coalition necessarily want to help like design the change.
Yeah.
and they also feel that because we've had like lots of conversations where we've came with the administration, with teachers at LSC meetings and had these conversations. So this is just what my coalition is telling me, that it's becoming a little bit redundant to kind of repeat the same things, but I can understand like where you would want student input. So maybe after the development of some plan, or like after like when there's something that's like an actionable step that's about to take place, maybe getting student input at that stage makes sense. But yeah, I just, from my understanding, students aren't really like feeling like they have to also like they have to experience it, and then they have to plan it, and then they have to, you know, make
I
sure
hear you.
it goes into action. But thank you for the offer.
No, no problem. Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate it, and I hear you.
Any other members? Let me have a suggestion, recommendation, or question or comment.
Yeah, JY, could you frame what you said sorry, I'm trying to think back, previously as a recommendation?
Yes, so I guess after now hearing Danaya's response, thank you for that, Danaya, and what Mr. Mitchell has said, I think my current recommendation based on what I've been hearing is that the Equity Committee / LSC put out some statement to acknowledge the statement put out by the Jones Black Coalition. I would also recommend, I don't know if this would come from the LSC or from Jones administration, an update on each of these 4 action items that the Jones Black Coalition put out in their original statement, just to make it explicit that it's been read, we are working towards some solutions, and this is where we currently are. So those 2 things would be my recommendation.
I would like again to reiterate that a meeting was had literally 3 days before the letter was put out. So administration was aware of the actionable steps and acknowledged progress with the Black Coalition at that time, what was being done. Now, I hear what you're saying in terms of updates, but I do want it to be clear that like there has been communication as relates to what has been currently worked on as relates to the actionable items.
So I'm noticing one of the things that and this was just specific to one of the actionable steps, but one of the requests was just regular updates. I'm wondering if we could take that on, being as the Equity Committee, as our responsibility to one, like settle on what the Black Student Coalition and others would like to see updates on, maybe including these action steps and possibly other steps or other things that could be that could have updates provided, and then just take that as our responsibility to on a regular cadence, monthly or whatever, quarterly, we're gonna make sure we are aware and we're following up with the various actors to get the information about what's been done, and then it's our responsibility to communicate that and to make sure that there's transparency about where progress is at.
So Michael and JY, just to add on that, what I'm hearing is the Jones Black Coalition sent this statement to the entire school-wide community. And perhaps that if the administration or this committee or the LSC, but I think it might be better from the administration, if they sent a response to the school-wide community saying, we heard you, we understand here are the 4 actionable steps, and this is how we're addressing. It doesn't have to be detailed, but just saying, we've done this, or this is where we are on item 1, this is where we are on item 2, this is where we are on item 3, this is where we are on item 4, and we're committed to fully see this through for everyone. Is that am I getting that? Is that the correct sense?
So yeah, yes, and I think what more where I was going was regular updates, like status updates on an ongoing basis, on a set basis.
Yeah, so Mr. Michael, so one of the things that the LSC and the students really pushed for was this equity page, an equity dedicated page that is being updated with the anti-racist work. So that might cover that. Maybe perhaps we can, the way that the Jones administration leadership team can address the statement in response is to put it on that page and say, here's what we're doing with item 1. Here's what we're doing with item 2. Here's what we're doing with item 3. And then just reinforce that we are committed to see this through.
So I just saw the monthly equity report from February that Violetta shared. And I think that like suffices as an update. So is that already on the equity page?
I don't think that's, if you're referring to Mr. Mitchell's equity report, I think that is in the LSC, the Jones LSC Drive. I'm not sure if it's actually posted on the Jones School equity page. On the Jones School equity page, I think that Mr. Mitchell and the school are updating on the anti-racist professional development that they've taken so far. I think they've completed 3 classes, if I'm not mistaken.
So what's on the equity tab on the website are the synopses for the anti-racist training, but it was just updated with our culture and climate plan, which encompasses all 4 priorities. Now, to your point, I guess we could add the LSC equity report because that kind of gives the update for each priority and can speak to whatever updates we have. So, for example, the work around the incident form and where we are with that. Additionally, I send out emails to all students on Friday. They're more general in nature, but when there are specific things to update them, whether it's equity, whether it's survey related, I am reaching out to students in that regard about the work that we're doing. So for example, last week the students were notified about the teacher session that occurred, and they were provided with the documents that the teachers received and a little snapshot of what was learned, or they were provided the link to the tab on the website. So the students have been given the information for the learning that's been happening with the staff.
Jay, well, I agree. That's a good suggestion of maybe taking Mr. Mitchell's report and then adding that to the equity page. Because I think one of the things that the students have been expressing is trying to get more regular updates on what the administrators are doing, what the staff is doing to address these things. So adding that could be, it sounds like, could be a real, I don't, for lack of a better term, like an easy thing that we can do that would address some of the things that we're talking about today. Mr. Mitchell, would you be amenable to doing something like that? Just adding your equity report to the dedicated equity page to the school?
Yeah, that can be done, but I feel like I literally just said I'm sending this information directly to the student, but I can do that. No harm in over, sending information.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. So I would like everyone to just continue to think about this, but also what Danaya said. It's beyond, it's to be more inclusive and to incorporate the other students and other clubs So if we can think about like other ways that we can reach out to them, and I'm always hesitant about making direct contact with any student. So if there are ways that we can think about before we reach out to any student, I think we need to make sure that we run it by Mr. Mitchell or the other assistant principals, Ms. Plunkett, who's on this call. And then maybe another suggestion is just maybe thinking about our committee creating a form to see like how we can best serve the students in the various cultural identity clubs. So just keep that in mind, and then let's bring this back at our next meeting with suggestions and recommendations on how we can better capture the student voice and ensure that we're supporting all the students. Okay. So moving on to the next agenda item is the number 8, the anti-Asian hate crimes and xenophobia. So the local school council passed a resolution a couple days ago. Rachel Zen, who's the chair on the health and safety committee, worked on that, and I applaud her. I just want to applaud her and her work, and with Mr. Brian Bastier, and the students and the Asian American clubs for working and put that statement out. I think it is important to continuously address these things. And one of the things that I took away from that is that really what we're talking about here, right? What the statements in the Asian American, the statement condemning violence and hate towards our Asian American students, communities, and their families and with the Jones Black Student Coalition statement is that the core issue here is this structural racism, right? This fallacy of a hierarchy of value, of human value, and putting value on people. And so I think it really was a strong statement. And I do appreciate the Health and Safety Committee working with the students. So thank you. And I just wanted to open up to the committee here, if they have any thoughts or comments, if there are any other, if there's any else that we can do to support our Asian American and Pacific Islander students. And if you have resources or recommendations or connections with organizations, I think that is the next step that we need to take to support our Asian American and Pacific Islander students and communities.
I think the statement is great. I just scanned over it. So thank you for sharing it, Violetta. I think there's an opportunity to highlight, or to, let me just say, be more intersectional in our response to this. So I think and I do have some resources. So we can share some resources around the history of, for example, Black and Asian solidarity in various labor movements across, the last century. So I think when we are attempting, striving to be anti-racist, sharing more of those resources, more of that history, naming instances where people of different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different races, different ethnicities have come together and stood united in solidarity with one another is super, super important. So I think this statement is great. And on top of that, I think perhaps we can compile some resources. I think it would definitely be under the purview of this committee, and then share that widely with the Jones Committee, with the Chicago community, to sort of highlight how, anti-Asian violence is steeped in white supremacy, and a lot of that anti-Blackness, it all stems from the same thing. So I think that's an opportunity for us to move in that direction.
JY, that is a great idea of just being a repository of information and then sharing that out with the school community. So I think I can create a folder so we can start collecting that information. If and I invite everyone, if you have resources or if you are affiliated with an organization or you know of an organization, we can start filling that into the shared folder. Are there any other members that would like to speak on this? Okay, moving on to item number 9, translation of the school-wide e-newsletter and communications. So this has been, our Spanish-speaking families have been, the students have been asking the school for several times for the school to translate their school-wide newsletter and the school website. And at the last LSC meeting, we had a student who spoke about her experience and how difficult it is when she's already at a very rigorous program and she doesn't necessarily have the time to translate the information to her mom. And so sometimes her family might miss out on things because she's doing what a student needs to be doing, right? Completing her homework, assignments, and studies. One of the things that we've recommended at the LSC is to create a budget line and to try to figure out how we can address this. And one way is create a budget line to try to pay for these services. A little over a quarter of the student population identify as Latinx or Hispanic. So if I remember correctly, it's about 28%, 29%. So I like to open it up to the floor to try to figure out, like, what else can we do? What other resources do folks have? And if you've been in a school community where your school was able to offer multiple languages or translate multiple languages, I would love to hear those recommendations.
I just have a quick question. Have we reached out to potentially any parents that could translate the newsletter? Has that happened before? Because at my previous school, it was actually a parent and an employee. What we would do is translate as much as we could, like online, and then ask the parent to do it. And she was able to do it every single time. I know that's a lot to ask for a parent, but especially there is a parent looking to get more involved in some capacity. That could be, a first step we take before, we can obviously pay for that, that parent, but I think that could be a first step.
So I'm not sure if the school has reached out to a parent to help with the translation. I guess I have two concerns about that. One, that would require a significant amount of coordination between the administrative leadership team and the parent to translate that. And that was one thing that Dr. Powers brought up at the LSC meeting, that if they had some of their staff or a third party to translate this, they would need like a lead time, right? Because they may not be able to translate it within an hour. So that's, I think, one challenge is just coordinating that. And then the second challenge is the student who spoke, and there were other students in the past who have asked for the Spanish translation, said this is a burden on them, right? On their family. And it's not necessarily a burden on all families, and that's not fair for them when they're trying to keep up with their coursework, keep up with their work lives. So I think that we have to try to think about how can we shift the burden that's already on those families somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess I would just echo that. Go ahead, Miss Lind.
I don't know how to raise my hand. I'm not the Zoom expert yet. I know when I read documents, because I used to live in Europe, and so we dealt with lots of languages all at the same time. And for the quick and dirty assessment of what was I looking at, I would go to Google Translate and do Google Translate. But if you're looking for a quality translation, none of the auto translators are good enough without having a native speaker take a look and say, does this make sense to me? And so, you know, there are a lot of different translation softwares available, but it still requires that somebody who knows the language checks the proofreading. So I'm not sure how easy this is. I mean, and the other question, of course, is, are the people who are looking for translation, do they have the computer skills to do that kind of thing themselves, and they just need to be shown how to do it, or do they not have access to computers? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go at it. But like, I have a girlfriend who writes a blog in Dutch, and I want to find out what she's doing. So I take the link to her website and I just plop it into Google Translate, and it tells me everything what she's written in English. It's not always perfect, but it's enough that I can understand what's going on. And so I think there's an opportunity to be helpful. But if we're going to commit that we're sending out quality translations, that's a huge ask. And somehow we've got to figure out, you know, how is 80% close enough that they get the gist of it and they can make the right reaction to it? Or do we need to have a quality translation? Because if you need a quality translation, then really somebody who's fluent in the language has to read it. And that's just my experience with translations.
Thank you, Deborah. I agree with you. So it sounds like, you know, there is a technological advantage here, but you're right, someone has to proofread that. And so the school, and Mr. Mitchell can correct me if I'm wrong here, but they have at least 2 Spanish-speaking staff members, one in the office and one in the counseling department. So perhaps as a kind of a compromise, right? If the school is going to prepare some sort of school-wide newsletter, and I think they do it on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, then having that translated through some sort of technology, and then having one of the staff members who's fluent in Spanish to proofread that to ensure that it's, as you said, maybe 75% or 80% accurate. Maybe that's a good compromise, because I agree with you, and maybe I'm mistaken here, but I don't think just relying on the technology and Google Translation and apps is not going to work, right? It's not sufficient. And that does a disservice to the Spanish-speaking families and the communities. And when we want to highlight Jones as this excellent school and diverse school, we need to ensure that we're intentional in our actions. And so that the Latino community can see that, wow, you know, they do care about us, and they are taking the steps to translate this and make sure and ensure that that it's accurate and meaningful to our Latinx families.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, Zanaya, too. There's definitely the Spanish component as well as the Mandarin component. So going back to the initial question, just like if anybody knows of organizations that do this kind of work and that do translate, like translation services, I know just like at my school, like staff members do it. They do get paid like extra to do the translating. But I do think that like language is a huge barrier to a lot of students and how they access and families and how they interact and communicate with a school community.
So I think we can, if we have a budget line and there are current employees who are able to translate and willing to do it, then we can, pay them from that budget line for extra hours. And I don't know, Jose, who's on here, might have some more details because I think they were doing something similar to this at Calamaica Elementary to cover some some other needs actually for like an extended day and recess duties that they had teachers do and paid an hourly wage for, even though they were salaried employees to cover those times. So I think this is something that if there are people on staff who could do it, that would be like a starter solution. And then if there's more needs than can be covered with that, then we'll have to figure out some additional thing. But that's like at least an initial method.
Mr. Mitchell, if I may, I would like to know if the school has done something like this historically, or in the second part of that, does the staff have the capacity to take on this initiative?
So, to my understanding, in the time that I've been there, some of the translations have, some staff members have volunteered their time to do various translations, whether it was in-person meetings or translation of documents that has happened. For example, the last document, and I think Mrs. Zinn mentioned it in the chat towards the beginning of the meeting, some correspondence that went out that was translated by a few staff members into Mandarin and into Spanish. So we've had that, but the question that you guys are talking about is long-term processes. And so the line item idea is great. We can do that. As far as like individual translations, there was a service that we were utilizing, but it lost its vendor status. So we're currently looking at whatever else the district is providing. I believe Dr. Parks did say that at the last LSC meeting. And that's just kind of where we stand right now. I think we're, in a much better position because there is more conversation happening and looking for those actions as opposed to kind of piecemealing some things the way that it has been done in the past. So definitely moving in a positive direction for systemic, consistent abilities to translate for for various populations of students and families.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Are there any other suggestions or recommendations or just, how can we continue to address this?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Hernandez.
Yes. Looking at the document from October of last year in regards to the equity work update, the document that was prepared on item 3, priority number 3, it mentions, let me see, it says we'll work with the various cultural groups to ensure that they have a voice. And this is from October of last year, the document. Now, today, we're in March already. How many more months do we need to find a translator or to find the funds or to find a way to even start? We have not even started to do anything on this. We need to start somewhere and then get better and then get better and then do better, right? So I would suggest that there's a huge need in that we need to prioritize this because the students are being affected right now.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. And I agree. I've heard, as I mentioned, I've been at the school for now 18 months, I think. And I've heard students come up and ask for documents to be translated. And it sounds like from Mr. Mitchell that there's some conversation going on around this. And Mr. Mitchell, is there, what can we do now? Or in when I mean now, like in the immediate future, in the next couple weeks, because we only have, I think to Mr. Hernandez's point, is that we only have a few months left before the end of the school. And I would like to see something before the fourth quarter begins, before our students are given the option or before Jones reopens the school to the wider school community. So are there things that we can do now or things that you can share that, you know what, this is what we're doing right now, and it's going to be launched in a couple of weeks or something like that, like a time frame?
So I will bring this specific question to the rest of the leadership team, and we can try to develop or draft some sort of plan of our next steps, because there are some moving pieces that are happening that I need to get more information about that I'm not prepared to share, with this body. So I'm not going to waste everyone's time by trying to give smoke and mirrors. At the end of the day, I will meet with the team, the rest of the team, and we can communicate to you all what our plan is. And you just gave me a time frame. You'd like to see something, as soon as possible. So we will pull together what's currently being done and what our plan is. So it's all in one, place.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Is there anyone else on this committee that would like to make any sort of comments or have any other ideas?
So to Mr. Hernandez's point about doing something now and improving and maybe not waiting until there's a perfect solution. I want to, Mr. Menjivar, I want to acknowledge your point about the technologies are not good enough, and those not good enough translations, do a disservice to our Spanish-speaking families. I'm wondering if maybe between now and whenever we put a suitable thing in place to get things properly and fully translated, I'm wondering if we could use some of those technologies and have like some sort of disclaimer on the document saying like, translated via whatever, please excuse any inaccuracies or whatnot. And maybe include within that, we're working on a fuller solution. Just to get those to start now with something that would improve upon the what the current state is while we continue to work on a fuller solution. To Mr. Hernandez's point about starting now and improving.
Michael, that is a great suggestion. Just having, I think at the last LSC, I think Mr. Hillbrands, who's a member on the local school council, talked about putting an app or something like that that's automatic. So perhaps asking Mr. Hillbrands to look into some sort of automatic translation. And I don't want families to be searching on Google. I want families to push a button and that document gets translated with a disclaimer that, pardon the translation. We are working for a long-term, to Mr. Mitchell's point, we're working on a long-term systemic solution, but to address the students' needs now, here's what we got going. And we're gonna continue to build on that. Mr. Mitchell, is that something that your team could look into, Mr. Hillbrands could look into, like just putting some sort of app on these school-wide email communications, and then just having a disclaimer?
All I can do is ask. I can't speak for Mr. Hillbrands. He's not present, but I can bring that to the conversation. To be clear, you're asking about an app that could do some immediate translation, and with that, a disclaimer clearly, because it wouldn't be 100% accurate, but a disclaimer that this is what we have available at this moment in time till we can find something a little more suitable. The plan sounds fine. Can we do it? I have to, see. So I'm not promising. I can just promise to start the conversation. I do want to, since I have the floor for a second, just, never mind. Never mind. But yes, that's what I'll do.
And thank you so much, Mr. Mitchell. And that's all we're asking is just to start the conversation and to move it along. So thank you. Okay. So moving to item number 10. So this is the CPS equity framework. So the Chicago Public Schools created the Office of Equity a couple years ago. And to my knowledge, it is the first time CPS has ever created a dedicated office to address some of the equity. And if you look at Dr. Janice Jackson's 5-year vision plan, one of the things that is clearly highlighted is the term equity that surrounds the apple. And so everything that Dr. Janice Jackson in her 5-year vision plan is focused on equity. And so one of the things that I think is important for us is to review that document that was released, I believe it was released over the summer of 2020, so that we can understand how to align and build on that equity framework. So we have common language. So basically, I want to make sure that we all are using a shared language. So when we talk about equity, when we talk about intersectionality, when we talk about liberatory thinking, that we understand we have a common definition. And so the resource is there. So I ask everyone just to take a look at that, review it, and then try to figure out like, how can we address, so we should use that to how we can address that to support the work that Mr. Mitchell and the team is doing at the school. And then Ms. Creswell had shared an Excel spreadsheet yesterday or at the last LSE meeting. And I put it in the share folder, and you all should have access to that share folder. And these are some of the demands and requests that students, staff, I believe staff and community members have made. And so I would just like everyone to take a look at that spreadsheet and think about what are some items that this body can take on to support the students and maybe alleviate some of the work that Mr. Mitchell's already doing. Obviously in collaboration, in conjunction with Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell mentioned earlier, if there are a few things that we can take on because they don't have necessarily the resources and we can take those on. I think that's something that we should think about, maybe highlighting 3 items on there and then working with Mr. Mitchell to make sure that we're not duplicating work. So I just want people to think about that and just look at that spreadsheet, and then I think we can discuss what 3 items do you think we need to take on and try to respond to those things and make suggestions and recommendations.
Mr. Mitchell, is your hand up or is that old?
Yes, my hand is up. I just wanted to add some context. Mr. Mitchell mentioned to you all to review the equity framework, which I highly recommend. It does give some context to a lot of things. I just wanted to emphasize that it's listed on the Jones website as our culture and climate plan, and I reiterated it at the last LSC meeting. But our plan with the 4 priorities that are listed, attention that has been given to connect it to the equity framework. So it's been crafted in that lens. So it speaks to like which priorities speak to liberatory thinking and so forth. Additionally, that document does make connections to our CIWP so that the work that we're doing is tied into our school improvement plan. So I just want to make note of that. As it relates to the other shared document, the last point I want to make is the priorities that were created stemmed from the list of demands that we collected from the spring. So even some of the points that are listed on that folder are kind of folded into those larger priorities. So I just want to put that out there as well. So as you have that checklist of what is being done and the progress that's being made there, there may be some overlap with if you were to just look at the framework or the plan that we've already kind of put out there.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. At this point, are there any other comments or regarding the CPS equity framework or what Mr. Mitchell has, Mr. Mitchell's comments?
I don't really have any other questions, but just thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for adding a whole lot of context tonight during this meeting. I really appreciate that.
It is my plan or my intentions to be at the meetings, because I don't see how this committee can operate without having some sort of staff or connection during these meetings to put some things in context and to have a more fruitful conversation. So yeah, myself or some of the other school leaders will be present at every committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. All right. Moving on to item number 11. Are there any public participation?
Hi. I just had one quick thing that I wanted to share with you guys. I mean, probably people are familiar with this, but just the idea of doing racial equity impact assessments, and it's kind of like a thing that governing bodies do, and I think something that would be helpful for the LSC going forward, especially as we have to develop the budget or approve the budget and evaluate it, and thinking about also the CIWP, because that's also a document that can change even between the 2 years that you definitely have to update it. And so I'll just put a link in the chat about what REIAs are. And, you know, I don't think as an organization we have the capacity to do like a formal version of this on everything, but to kind of think of the equity committee as the place where this sort of assessment can happen for the benefit of the LSC, I think would be really helpful. Just from my perspective as an LSC member, the kind of information and questions that these have on policies as you're figuring stuff out, I think would be really just kind of a framework to look at things. So I just thought I would bring that to you guys at this initial meeting to think about.
Thank you, Cassie. So are there any other public participation?
Not a participation, but if I can take this moment just to get a clarifying question, because I know we're getting ready to adjourn shortly. The two things I'm bringing back, one is adding the equity report to the website. And then the second thing is following up a conversation as it relates to our next steps with overall translations. What are we planning on doing in the next few weeks? What's already being done, and being able to kind of share out a tentative plan of action. Is that correct?
I think that you've summarized it very well. Yep. Yep. And then, oh, Laura.
Sorry, one more thing. I think also if you could, I don't know if I misheard this, but like including it in the Friday messaging to the students. I think that was a third thing.
Okay. I know I said that I currently do that, but
Yeah.
I guess you're asking that I make sure that I do that. When I message to the students, it's kind of like a week to week, like what's the hot topic for that particular week. So like this week, a lot of the conversation we centered around AP registration and making sure some things are done with that. I forgot the other two things because actually when I'm done here, I'm going to craft that email that goes out to the students first thing in the morning. So I can focus on a couple of equity updates and reminders and links back to information that's already on the equity tab.
And I think just to follow up on what JY said, if somehow we can be, as a suggestion, being explicit about how the administration is addressing each one of those 4 items, and it can be, I know it's part of the report, but sometimes that might get lost in the verbiage, but just being really explicit.
Okay.
And then for this committee, it's just reviewing the CPS equity framework. And then one of the things is trying to figure out, like, how can we reach out to the club organizations and get them involved, some of the cultural identity, and get their voices involved in our committee, and how we can connect with them and some of the addressing some of their concerns. As Mr. Mitchell mentioned, that they just don't have the capacity to touch base with all of the clubs and organization. Maybe that's something that we can do. So just thinking about how we can approach that.
One suggestion is, as LSC members, I have to look at the details, but can you, like, what in terms of volunteer status and getting that approved, then when clubs have their meetings, you could potentially be invited, as long as their club sponsors there. So there may be the window of that opportunity. But I'm looking into that. That might be a solution.
I think that would be great, Mr. Mitchell, if there's a way for either individual members and just being invited to having like a session with the individual club, cultural identity clubs, to try to get their feedback, and then we can come back and regroup as a committee to share out.
That can happen, or yeah, that's fine.
Okay, that's a great suggestion. Thank you so much, Mr. Mitchell. Okay, so I need to try to gauge, like, when can we meet next? CPS's quote unquote spring break during the pandemic is this last week in March. I think it's the 28th through the 5th. Or yeah, the March 28th through the 4th, and then the students return on the 5th. So one, I just want to make sure what dates would work and time. I can tell for me, Wednesdays, I'm available after 6:30.
Yeah, generally I'm available around the same time, Monday through Thursday, as long as I have enough heads up.
This Thursday at 6:30, like at 6:30 work for folks? Yes?
Yes.
Excellent. And then when would people feel like they would have enough time to review the materials and touch base? And then Mr. Mitchell, just to extend the courtesy to you, what would work with you? 2 weeks out, or coming back after the spring break?
I appreciate the courtesy. you all need the space to work. I can try to adjust my schedule, and if I can make it, or if I can make it to a part of, we can work it out that way. Yeah. So if you guys are gonna meet right before spring break, I can, figure out when, on my calendar, like how long I can participate. And if I can't participate, figure out a way to communicate with you all, or have a line of communication where, like, the questions that you have for me that I can then answer and send back to the body, so we can work it out that way. So I'm flexible in this regard.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. So I would propose then, does April 8th work for people at 6:30? Yes? Great. Okay, so then I will set the meeting for April 8th at 6:30, and then we'll touch base. So thank you again for volunteering and being a part of this work. And I think that again, is to support the work that's already happening and provide the resources that the school needs to ensure that every student has a great experience, right? Not just academically. And I'm going to use something that Dora mentioned, but emotionally too, right? Academically and emotionally, that they have a positive experience. So, oh, Laura, yes.
Thank you again, everyone, also. But I just wanted to let you know that in the chat, I dropped the link for the minutes, a draft of the minutes. So if there's anything I missed in there, I just bolded the notes, and you guys can let me know if, I don't know if there's like a sample, like previous minutes. I tried to script and do a combination of summarizing. But if you have like a historical agenda that I can, like with minutes, I can sort of look at, or I can look at your website and do that. Just, I don't know if that works, let me know.
Thank you, Laura. I'll take a look at that, and then everyone, please take a look at that. But that was fast. So thank you. And then I just want to thank Mr. Mitchell and Ms. Plunkett for participating in this conversation. And I really do appreciate the work that you're doing and the time that you take to share this space. So without further ado, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, so if there are no objections, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much. Please take care, please be safe, and I appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Danaya.
I was gonna wait to make sure nobody has any questions.